So yeah, next panel, destroying Bitcoin. We're gonna figure out how to get rid of this thing, I think.
So are we trying to destroy Bitcoin?
I think so.
Okay.
Aren't we?
Let's do it.
Yeah. So I got a whole bunch of sort of ideas scribbled down on how we could do it, and then we'll discuss what we think is the best strategy, what's viable, what's not. My name is Adam van Wirdum. I'm technical editor at Bitcoin Magazine. I'll let you guys introduce yourselves. Okay. Samson.
I'm Samson Mo. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Blockstream.
I'm Dan Held. I'm one of the co-founders of Interchange.
All right. So, destroying Bitcoin. I think there are kind of like three maybe main categories of how to destroy Bitcoin. I don't know how you guys feel about it. So maybe one category is like technical, one category is more economical, and one category is maybe more social, political. So I'd suggest we sort of go by them one by one.
Sure.
What kind of, like, are there any technical risks you think? Like, could a crucial bug bring down Bitcoin? Like, could that actually destroy Bitcoin? Have there been bugs that could have done that were fixed in time? Or like, how bad could a bug be? What are your thoughts on that?
Go first.
I guess I'll take a first stab at that. Even if there is a bug, we've taken our stored time and energy, which is money, and have decided to put that in the Bitcoin ledger. And so even if there's a bug that breaks the rules of what we all agreed upon, if that bug happens, we can still, at a last-ditch effort, we could roll it back to before when that bug occurred. So what really is, the Bitcoin ledger is what we're preserving here. And we, I think, collectively would agree that as of a certain sort of state or date, that is what that accurately represents all of the stakeholders in the system. So even with a bug, it doesn't necessarily kill Bitcoin. It damages it, and it damages confidence in it, but it still wouldn't destroy Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
I think so. Recently there was the inflation bug that could have destroyed Bitcoin, but it was caught and fixed. But there's always a risk because Bitcoin is just software, so there's always, as long as we're changing, the protocol is not ossified, there's always the chance that there will be a bug introduced at some point in the future. But I think the strength of Bitcoin is not just that we have really talented developers, but there's a really robust QA process in place where everyone is, looking at the code. I think recently, John Newberry started, like a book club to look at pull requests. Right. There's a lot of eyes looking at Bitcoin, and as there's more people building projects on it, there's even more people paying attention and keeping an eye out for things.
All right. What do you guys think of? Do you think this is something that comes up, like the quantum risk? If quantum computers are invented, like could that destroy Bitcoin?
I guess I can put on my quantum physicist hat here, which I'm not really that technical to dive in on the quantum side, but from what I've heard is that we, A, don't know if it's going to be a problem, B, we don't know when it's going to be a problem, so it could be very, very far away, and C, there are some steps that we can take to mitigate the risk of quantum computing being able to crack private keys or disrupt the Bitcoin network.
I think there's like parts of Bitcoin that can be swapped out to quantum resistant stuff that would not require a big change. I think in terms of mining, if you could have a quantum ASIC, that's technically okay as long as it's widely available and it's not just one party that's able to mine. But I think overall it's still very far away, maybe 10 years before we really need to worry about it. But it's always
10 years doesn't sound that long.
It's a long time for Bitcoin.
All right. Would like you mentioned like swapping it in or out? Do you know, would that be like a soft fork, hard fork kind of thing? Like it would be a protocol change, right?
Well, it depends what it is. If it's like signing, then you could use some different algorithm or something else that maybe doesn't need a hard fork.
Right, but it wouldn't be a crucial problem as far as we know. All right. Are there any other technical problems, like a technical thing that could bring Bitcoin down as far as you guys can think of?
I've spent a lot more time on the social and economic side in terms of those attack vectors, so I have an index.
Yeah, all right, let's get there then.
Sorry, what'd you say?
Yeah, all right. Let's go to the let's get to the next, like the economic risk.
But there
Or do you
are
want-
like technical ones that are also bound to the social attacks too,
Yeah,
right?
they're-
So for like the 2x client, what was the 2x client? BTC1.
Yeah.
That you could say that's a technical attack because it had like 4 bugs, and it would have failed on the first day if people followed it. So it's like a bundle. You get 2 for 1.
Wait, so you're saying that's both an economic and a social risk?
Yeah.
Because it's social if people adopt it, you mean?
Yes.
All right, yeah, fair enough. All right, so economic, like block, if the block subsidy runs out, is that, you wrote about this, right?
That's right. So the last article I wrote about was when the block subsidy, which is the newly minted Bitcoins in each block, as the block subsidy decreases over time, after the halving events, it drops in half. Transaction fees will have to supplement that in order to adequately compensate the miners to protect the Bitcoin network. And a lot of people have been really afraid about, will transaction fees rise in an equivalent manner to the decreasing block subsidy? And what's really interesting is that the decreasing block subsidy creates supply shocks. So during the halving events, the number of newly minted Bitcoins drops in half between one block and another, and that causes a supply shock. And we've seen bull market cycles occur in the Bitcoin space right after that. So what essentially this means is that over time, as the block subsidy decreases, we've seen each subsidy decrease have a corresponding boom-bust cycle. And in that boom-bust cycle, we've seen a lot more people come into this space and start to transact and move coins on layer 1, which increases transaction fees in fold. So we've seen transaction fees as a percentage of the block reward increase exponentially over time in an oscillating pattern based on the boom and bust cycles. And so based on historical data, if we plot that into the future, I don't think we're looking at a very critical situation. And the reason why this is important is that the Bitcoin miners are compensated for protecting the network with the block reward. And so the ledger is protected by game theory and economics. And so it's critical that they're well compensated so that they don't try to manipulate transactions or try to do any sort of short-term optimizations or manipulations that might hurt the sequencing of all the transactions in the blocks accurately.
Do you think at any point fees would get so high that people are actually going to use altcoins as substitutes and therefore it decreases Bitcoin security?
That's a great question. So when the 2017 bubble, it wasn't millions of people across the world looking for block space to transact on. They weren't looking across, traders in 2017, and consumers, they weren't looking across all these block spaces, calculating the transaction fee, the volatility fee, and the exchange fee. So when you use Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency and you use that block space and you pay to have your transaction included in that block, you're essentially paying the transaction fee plus the volatility fee between the time you bought it and the time you used it for a payment, and then the exchange fee, which is purchasing the cryptocurrency or selling it. And so, I don't think 2017 represented people trying to optimize fees. I think it represented more speculation, which I think is pretty well accepted now. And then when it comes to the price elasticity of a Bitcoin transactor, how much money is someone on layer 1 willing to pay to send their Bitcoin payment? We can use real world comps of other store of value assets to come up with a spectrum of prices people may be willing to pay. We can look at fiat wires. So in the United States, people are willing to pay between $40 and $80 per transaction. We can look at real estate transactions where people pay X percentage of the home's value in closing costs, which is tens of thousands or thousands of dollars. We can look at physical gold delivery. How much are people willing to pay to get physical gold delivered? And we can also look at offshore banking. So how much are people willing to pay to set up an offshore bank account, which, by the way, they still have to pay the wire fees to send money to and from that account. So I think that the price elasticity of Bitcoin transactors are very, very high. So I think as fees increase, people will pay for Bitcoin's core utility, which is a great store of value that's hard to seize and that it's immutable. And so people, I think, will pay a lot more money to send that value on the Bitcoin blockchain in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
long
a
answer.
good answer. Do you have anything to add, or?
No, I think a big concern, of course, is a block subsidy or block reward, and what happens when it gets lower. And there is a risk that some miners will opt out at a certain point because they're not making enough. Fees are not able to cover, and then there's that talk of the mining death spiral, and Bitcoin just dies. So that's one way, but I do think that fees will pick up over time, and they will make up for the bulk of the block subsidy, if not more. But it's kind of a function of people, more transactions, more pressure to drive up the fees, as well as Bitcoin's price rise itself. And I think, like your point was, will people use alts because fees are high? Well, we know at least one person that will, but I think generally people are not stupid, and they want to transact something that's valuable, right? If you want cheap fees, there's hundreds of things you could use, and you have the Lightning Network now, which we didn't have functional at that point when fees were making that big run up in 2017. So it's a different world now, and it's evolving very rapidly. I think Lightning penetration is going to keep on rising, and when fees get to that point, I think there's going to be a very robust layer 2, even layer 3. You have things like Blockstream Liquid, I have to say that. But there's a lot of channels to alleviate fee pressure for people that need lower fee transactions. You could have a side chain just for merchants if they wanted to do that. But the tech is available. It's all readily usable right now. And it's just a matter of growing that whole ecosystem.
And I would add one more thing, which is that I think we all forget to put on an empathetic consumer hat. The first time we transacted with Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency, the idea of paying a fee to pay someone is kind of ridiculous. Like at the coffee shop, when I pay with my $10 bill, they don't attach a fee to that. So any fee is already a level of friction that is much higher than people are used to. So it's not necessarily the value of the fee as well, it's just the idea that there is a fee.
But the fee is priced in, right? If you pay with a credit card, the merchant's already marked it up 4%. But if you do a bank wire, I recently made a wire to someone who didn't have to take wire payments before. And there was a $25 charge on his end, and he says, how come you didn't pay the $25 wire fee? And I said, no, I did, but that's your bank charging you.
That's right, but it's the perceived cost.
It is.
Do you guys see, so about social risk, do you see hard forks of Bitcoin? Do you see that as something that could actually threaten Bitcoin itself? How do you, could hard forks destroy Bitcoin?
I think by now, like yeneral Bitcoin populace community is really well inoculated, having gone through, 4 years of forks and all that drama, that people kind of understand now that yes, you can fork off, but then you're not staying with the main chain. It's just an altcoin, and they've all trended down towards zero. Like Bcash is 0.04 now.
So you think that will remain the sort of perception that people have, that if you hard fork, then that's the altcoin, that's not Bitcoin?
I think so.
Even if it has like a hash power majority or something like that? What if we're still in very early stages with Bitcoin? Like, what if it grows and it becomes much bigger? Like this education that we had over the past 4 years, as you describe it, like that could get lost maybe over time. And if you have a whole new community base, or like 95% of new users, or
that's why I keep telling you have to write that book. But yeah, I mean, hash rate is all. There's always people out there that says hash rate dictates everything, but from what we saw with the UASF and No2x, it doesn't really matter. And I think there were a lot of very vocal people saying a lot of things that they had no intention of backing up. Because if you're running a mining pool or you're a miner, you actually don't have that freedom. You have fixed costs, capex that you have to handle. And if you're going to go all in, then you're probably going to get wrecked pretty badly, like some people did.
Yeah,
you want to add something?
Yeah. Money is a shared belief system. It has value because we all believe in it, whether that be gold, the dollar, fiat currencies, or Bitcoin. And hodlers, or the believers who stored their time and energy, their money, into Bitcoin really dictate kind of the future of it. Miners don't make any money if no one wants to buy it. Developers aren't really incentivized to go build and improve the protocol or build applications on top of it if no one uses it or believes in it. And so social attack vectors, I think, are critically important to be cognizant of. If there was an issue that was equally split, like 51%, 49%, or 50-50, I think that would be very damaging. Where with Bcash, it was a much smaller minority. It still damaged Bitcoin's social network because we did lose a certain percentage.
And it's
of the
confusing to
community.
noobs.
Yeah, it's confusing to noobs. People get confused. Roger Ver, I think, maliciously confuses noobs on Bitcoin.com and with a Bitcoin Twitter handle, which we presume he owns. And I think, in addition, it's confusing. It's also, people think it's inflation. Some people often quote, "Oh, you can print as many Bitcoin as you want because you can fork it." So, yeah, it's more annoying at this stage, but there could be an issue in the future that might be equally divisive, and I think that would be a potential social attack vector.
Yeah, but I think we've built up kind of a good defense. One of the big social attack vectors that I was always worried about was the block explorers. At the height of the Civil War, there's two really big block explorers controlled by hostile parties. And if they decided to just switch over to the minority chain and present it as the majority, that would be massively damaging. That's why I pushed really hard at Blockstream to build Explora, and then it's open source Block Explorer, anyone could run it. We launched blockstream.info. I think Bitcoin Magazine has one, Bull Bitcoin has one, but anybody can fork it, launch their own Block Explorer, and everyone should run a full node ideally, but not everyone is going to do that. People will rely on Block Explorers.
Right.
So we're building up more defenses over time, and hopefully we'll be able to survive the next thing, whatever it is.
Do you guys think Bitcoin could survive a government attack? Like if it would really get to that level where states start attacking Bitcoin, and how would they do it, and would they have a chance there?
Well, we've seen how effective the government efforts are against the war on drugs. It's definitely been a very successful operation over the last 100 years. So given that, one, they have a tremendous problem stopping people from obtaining substances that they want. So if people want to obtain money, people similarly find ways around any sort of roadblocks or barriers. And then as well, we're not going to see all the governments across the world band together and decide to stop people from buying Bitcoin. They can't do that with climate change. They can't come together on other issues. And I think it's really implausible to suggest that all the governments across the world would band together on this one issue only.
Plus, Bitcoin is decentralized enough that it could survive any ban much easier than, say, drugs or anything like that, because it's just information. You can have your own Swiss bank account in your pocket. As we improve all the privacy tech, it makes it even harder to ban, and things like Lightning just make it really simple to use and transact Bitcoin.
Well, let me give you an example. What if they, for example, nationalized chip foundries and basically control the hash rate that way, sort of in an indirect way? That's very hard to compete against, perhaps. How would Bitcoin deal with that? Could proof of work change, or would it just not work in the first place? Or
I think it's hard to nationalize the foundries because they're not just making Bitcoin chips, right? They're making stuff for Intel, for Apple, for everybody. And if you do that, that's probably going to be more damaging to other industries than to Bitcoin industries. We actually make up a very small portion of overall chip production.
For now.
For now. But down the road, yes, some government somewhere could nationalize foundries, but there are many foundries around the world in different jurisdictions, and if it depends what they're doing. If they're nationalizing it to produce chips to mine Bitcoin, good for them. If they're nationalizing it to prevent production of chips, then you're just incentivizing some other jurisdiction to create chips. And it only takes about 20 million to tape out an ASIC. So if Bitcoin price keeps going up, then a couple Bitcoin whales could just decide, okay, we're going to make our own ASIC and go.
And as we've seen with other socialized industries, the bureaucracy internally would be highly financially incentivized to print extra ones and then to maybe use that to print Bitcoin miners, and they'd use that to covertly mine or come up with some way to generate additional cash flow. If you have machines that print money, it's sort of irresistible to not want to create them and then print money with them.
Yeah, but covert mining is really hard. The scale of all the mining operations now is so massive that there's going to be a leak if some country is mining on any significant level.
All right, what else do we got? What other soft spots do you guys see? Like mining pools, perhaps? Is that something they could attack? Yeah, let's tackle mining pools first.
Yeah, Matt Corallo's done a good job in surfacing this issue, which is that Bitcoin miners spend capex to purchase the ASICs and opex, which is the electricity, and so they put in cost or sunk cost, and they receive block rewards or a certain percentage of the block rewards in the future, and so they're essentially guaranteed some X percentage of future cash flows, depending on how many other miners are out there. And they have a financial incentive to behave properly because they don't want to damage their future cash flows. But if someone got a hold of a mining pool and used it maliciously, they don't care about burning the money. And so I think that would be a critical issue. And Matt is much more knowledgeable about this, but to the best of my knowledge, it's not extremely difficult to do this. And so it does represent, I think, a pretty critical attack vector at this moment.
It is an potential attack, but I don't think it's as bad as some people worry about it being, because I used to run a big mining pool, the BTCC pool, and at its peak, I think we're like 20%. Back in the scaling wars, a lot of mining pools said, we're going to do this, but that's just someone blowing smoke, because they can't do that. They have their own customers. If they decided to point their hash rate and attack Bitcoin, they'd probably get hung up by their toes. So they can't do what they want. They can post stuff on social media, but it's very different when you're running a business. And a mining pool is a business. They can't just freely do anything.
All right. What else we got? Is it in any way plausible, I don't know, buying developers, corrupting developers? Is that something you guys, like starting a company, buying all of the prominent developers? What do you think?
You're talking about Blockstream?
Maybe.
Well, the thing is, almost everything that Blockstream does is open source. So technically, if our board says, okay, do evil stuff, then we just step out and we still have all our code. So it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I think the Bitcoin community long-term hopes that there's ossification on layer 1 to where that threat becomes more and more mitigated over time as new code is rarely introduced and as it kind of becomes more concrete and ossified.
But I think the most important thing is don't hold anyone up on a pedestal and say, we should believe him. It's just living the don't trust, verify motto. And don't choose a hero and say, this guy's right, we should listen to him, because it doesn't end that well usually.
All right. Well, I guess we're almost out of time. Did we miss something? What do you see a weak spot somewhere that you'd like to bring up?
I don't know. Sometimes
attack the privacy level, or
well, I think Blockstream's done a good job in terms of internet connectivity. The Blockstream satellite is a critical part of developing a more robust infrastructure that doesn't just rely on the current internet pipes, where there's ham radio with Nick Szabo and NVK. Those guys have done some really cool stuff around propagating transactions through ham radio,
mesh networks,
Blockstream satellite. So I think that internet partitioning, or if the internet got cut off, these are really cool solutions that help mitigate that.
Yeah.
All right.
Peter's going to kick us off.
I guess that's it for us.
No.
No?
No.
More?
We got the next guys up.
Yeah, we're done, right?
We're done, man.
We're done. Guys, we're done.
I mean, you
Thank
can carry on.